Welcome to this segment of Drinking on the Edge, focusing on wine producers from all over the world. Joining me today from her native South Africa is Barbara Melck. Barbara is the chief winemaker as of last year for Reyneke Wines. She is a Stellenbosch native through and through. She grew up in the town, which is located in the region. It's the main wine producing area in South Africa. Check your bottle of South African wine. 50-50 chance you pick it up. It's going to say Stellenbosch on there somewhere. It is she's raised in a family where wine was always a focal point. Her grandfather worked in wine industry his entire life, and through her relationship with her grandpa, she developed a deep respect, love, and interest for wine. That was carried out when she ended up studying at the University of Stellenbosch enology, study of winemaking, and viticulture, the study of grape growing. And after her graduation, she worked at some internships around Stellenbosch and other parts of the world. And since 2016, she took on working at Rhinecliff, which is a partner in Reyneke Wines, Johan Reyneke, who I met in 2013. Well, a little bit more about him later. Barbara, she's the winemaker, and we're going to be tasting a few wines from her work. Barbara, thanks for joining Drinking on the Edge.
Thank you for having me. It's a big honor.
So many people in the United States have had the opportunity to visit their wine-producing areas, especially in California. What makes South Africa's wines unique amongst all the wines of the world?
South Africa, we've got an interesting kind of wine-producing area, but especially along with that, we've got an amazing history. I think something a lot of people usually forget when I think about South African wine is we have this broad way of thinking. We divide wine into New World and Old World wine. So South Africa's actually got a really long history of winemaking, which makes it fall in between the two to an extent. So the first vines had planted in South Africa in 1659, with the idea of South Africa becoming a refreshment area for all the ships that used to come past towards India. So with that, we've got this amazing history, but along with that, you've got unbelievable diversity within South Africa itself. And in a quite a small area. South Africa is quite a big country, but most of the winemaking is centered in one province, which is the Western Cape. And within that, there are a few regions with that end up being quite diverse. So some of them are quite mountainous, some of them are quite close to the ocean, some are a bit more dry, which give us this amazing diversity with the South Africa. And another thing is we've got the oldest viticultural soils. Our soils date back to 700 million years, a lot of them. And they date back from when everything was still one big continent. And then everything split up and kind of all the continents split up. But our soils still predate kind of that continent split, which is quite unique. And actually gives us quite a lot of respect for the soils.
Yeah, and buttressing the old soils, I believe South Africa is one of the leading lights in this recent movement for old vines that have spread around the world for people who are wine geeks. They love these wines made from older vines, and South Africa has a good representation of those.
Yeah, we're quite lucky. We've got this amazing viticulture in South Africa. Her name is Rosenberg, and she headed up this project to try our best to preserve the old vines that we do have in South Africa. And then with that, it's brought to life this amazing treasure that we have within the old vines in the country. And it's just added so much value.
It sure has. I've had the pleasure of Rose's time recently. She's quite feisty, but she's quite the intellect. I really appreciate her. Here in my native U.S., we have the different factors that contributed. How in South Africa is wine enjoyed and embraced? If I were to drop down into Cape Town or Joburg, and I would go to asking for a glass of wine, what sort of environment would I experience?
There's amazing diversity within South Africa, and along with this diversity, there's quite a diverse wine culture that has developed around that. So it can range anywhere from getting invited over to somebody's house for a very casual braai, and someone opening a bag-and-box wine on the side and just enjoying it for the pleasure of wine.
Okay.
Or you do get the fine restaurant scene where you can have an amazing plate of food paired with a beautiful glass of wine. So it varies from all spectrums. Yeah, especially because South Africa is actually the biggest beverage in South Africa is probably consumed as beer. So wine is still a bit of an up-and-coming drink within the greater South Africa. Once again, as I said, you'll have sockets where you have people that have a bigger appreciation for wine, and then people that drink wine on a regular basis because they prefer drink. It's a bit of everything.
This brings up to the question I had earlier. I forewarned you of. South African cuisine doesn't necessarily have the same panache, the same buzz as Italian or Mexican does in the United States. These cuisines have become almost ubiquitously American in some respect. How, aside from braai, B-R-A-A-I, that I've become aware of through occasional events here in the U.S., which is your version of barbecue, and a big respect on that, drinking the Reyneke wines. And they would say, you know what, I'm drinking Reyneke wines from Stellenbosch, South Africa. I might as well have some South African style food. What would be kind of a common plate to find you might when you're in dining out or dining in?
Yeah, so once again, we've got a lovely history when it comes to the cuisine in South Africa, which is largely based on the fact that Cape Town was a port city, and there was a lot of movement in terms of ships coming through and spices traveling to and from here. And then with that, we've got quite a rich spice history within our foods to an extent. Also, a lot of food that came from the Malays who came as slaves to South Africa. So one of the big things you'll find that's quite unique to South Africa is a dish called Zoboti, which is...
Can you spell that for our listeners, please?
Yeah, so it's Bodo. Tie.
Thank you.
And this is a kind of like a sweet, mild curry, but it's usually made with mint. It's cooked for a while, and it's got a bit of a kind of like an egg custard topping to it. Raisins and cinnamon and cumin and kind of like just a lovely curry spicing. And that was great with some South African Shannon, just because you get that lovely fruitiness from the Shannon that'll kind of enhance the fruit and the flavors from the bobotie. As you said, Brian, we do enjoy our meat quite a lot in South Africa. And meat made on open fire, and we're quite traditional, where it has to be made with wood and not with charcoal or briquettes or on gas. It has to be proper wood. And then with that, our red wines complement those meats quite nicely, especially with a bit of smoky element that you get from the wood-fired coals.
On that note, you've made a great segue opportunity here for us, Barbara, because we indeed have with us, Matt and I at 8-something in the morning are to be tasting Reyneke wines, 3 of them, which the folks at Vineyard Brands were kind to provide to us. These first one is a Chenin Blanc. It's a 2021 and is your Stellenbosch Chenin Blanc. So let's talk about, before we break down this wine, and I have to tell you, I opened this bottle a couple of days ago and put a cork in. I want to taste it because I was well impressed. But on a broader scale, Chenin Blanc has taken hold in South Africa in quite a way. There's, in the last decade or so, been a big uptick in Chenin Blancs from South Africa being exported. In my visit there 9 years ago, I saw this was a craze that was just beginning, a lot of plantings going on. Why Chenin Blanc for South Africa? It's not worldwide the sexiest grape out there. There's legendary ones made in France's Loire Valley, and for very good reason, of all types of styles: sparkling, dry, semi-dry, sweet, very sweet. The grape is very flexible. It can also be quite productive, as I've discovered talking to viticulturalists. Why Chenin Blanc in South Africa as we taste your 2021?
Chenin Blanc is the most widely planted variety in South Africa. And that comes down to one of the points you made. Listen to the history of the South African wine industry. It's the bulk of our history was not necessarily producing fine wine, but producing a lot of high volume wine. This has changed within the last 30 years, but generally speaking, that was the bulk of our history. And within that, a lot of varieties that were planted were either planted, or the biggest bulk majority of varieties planted were either planted for brandy production or were planted as high yield varieties. Chenin managed to tick both.
And Chenin managed to do both.
Tick both boxes.
Got it.
So within that, there was a history of lots of plantings of Chenin. But with that, this amazing thing happened. Because it was widely planted over the entire South Africa wine region, we realized the diversity within Chenin, how amazingly it adapted to a region like Stellenbosch, which produces one style of fruit, but then you can easily work in a region like Swartland, which is a bit dry, it's a bit hotter, and it delivers a different style of Chenin, but it still delivers an amazing quality of Chenin.
Sorry to interrupt you, but especially off those old vines.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that's where the whole old vine renaissance also came in, because the bulk of the old vines that are still in the soil are Chenin vines. Because for some reason, we've got a big problem with leaf roll in South Africa, leaf roll virus, which is
it's ubiquitous. We have in California. It's a big deal.
Yeah, but funny enough, some of these old vine Chenin don't express the virus as much as other old vines do. So there's a bit of theory still going around. I'm not sure if Ruth might have touched on it while you guys spoke, but it's interesting. So you get all these old vines and you test the Chenin vines. You can see they do have virus. It's not like they're not virus, but they just don't express the virus as severely as other varieties.
So what you're saying for those people who may not have the horticultural background here, and that is they don't express the virus, just means that they don't suffer from the problems that the virus will give compared to other vines. So Chenin Blanc is more sturdy, it's more resilient in the face of this leaf roll virus. Okay, and then I have to, and I'm going to take a little shift here if you don't mind, Barbara. So we understand the how it is that Chenin Blanc has taken a lead in the white wine being produced and coming out of South Africa. I have to ask you, specific to Reyneke, why not Pinotage? For those listeners unfamiliar, Pinotage is a grape variety that was developed a century plus ago in South Africa for producing, as Barbara had indicated before, high volume wines for just easy, cheap drinking in a country that was very poor and didn't have the opportunity, so isolated, to trade so much with the rest of the world for their wine. But at Reyneke Wines, you don't plant Pinotage. Why is that?
Yeah, so funny enough, we used to have Pinotage. I think that we used to have a tiny Pinotage block. And that's where Johan kind of started converting the farm towards biodynamics and organics. I think he started with a tiny Pinotage block. Pinotage is an interesting variety. It works in certain places and it doesn't work in other places.
Mm-hmm.
I think with the way we make wine at Reyneke, it's quite hands-off. Pinotage, it is possible to make wine in that way, but you have to have other factors that work quite nicely in order to produce a wine of that style. Unfortunately, it doesn't work for us at Reyneke. If my answer makes sense, sorry.
It's okay. Before we continue, and am I querying you about biodynamic viticulture? Thanks for dropping that into the conversation. Chenin Blanc, this 2021, you had a hand in making it, even though at the time you may not have been the head winemaker. You had a hand in it. So this 2021 Chenin Blanc in our glass, that's available here in the United States for about $25 in your shelf.
The lovely thing about the Chenin, on the farm, we've only got 2 blocks of Chenin Blanc, and both are certified old vines. So the one block is planted in 1974, the other one in 1976. We get quite a small yield. And with that, I think with South African Chenin, if you use Loire Chenin, if you try South African Chenin for the first time, it'll seem a bit on, because it's a lot more expensive than what you'd find from Loire Chenin. What you've got to this Chenin, it to me is always just been such a unique wine, and even for this vintage. It's got this kind of beautiful, very light floral edge to it, but with this rich fruit that kind of just engulfs that floral note. And then on the palate, once again, you get this lovely richness, but there's a lightness to it at the same time. And then something that's quite unique to me about old vine Chenin is you just get this hint of grip on the finish.
Hint of
like
what?
This grip, like a slight phenolic touch. Yeah. That you kind of on the finish of the wine and just kind of lends intrigue and just balances the both of the palate.
Yeah, I find this very alluring, very easy to enjoy. It's not simple, it's not complicated, it's somewhere in between, and it's absolutely a pleasure, easy wine to drink. There's a certain roundness and richness on the palate. That's not from sugar. Is there any oak vinification taking place here at all?
So this is all vinified in food drop, so 2,500 litre oak class.
Right. So neutral wood, basically.
Neutral wood.
That would help give it that roundness. I've become familiar with fooders. Nicely done, Barbara. Really good. This is a really good.
I love you.
I have no problem recommending this for all sorts of situations. I would have loved to have shared some of this with Matt with some oysters, but there was none at the market yesterday. Okay. So before we continue on to your 2 reds you got here, well, you know what? Why don't we do that? Why don't we taste your Syrah? And this is labeled made with organic grapes, okay, from 2017. Though all your wines are organic, so whether it says it or not, you can rest assured the Reyneke wines will be organically grown. So what is it about this Syrah? What was the transition and the inspiration and the reasoning for growing biodynamically there? And we'll taste your Syrah as we do that.
Yeah, so it all can come down to Johan Reyneke, who is the founder of Rhinecliff wine. And when he started as a young man while he was studying, he had to make a bit of pocket money. So he and his father had a small vineyard, and he used to work as a farm laborer and get a bit of extra money. So he'd kind of work on the farm during the day, and in the evenings he'll sit down and study. And what he studied was environmental philosophy. And he said during the day he'd go and he'd prune, and it would be such a cold day that he'd put it on it in the big surface, so he'd put on his wetsuit just to stay warm. And his fellow workers would have to take newspapers and put it in their shoes and put it in their clothes just to try and stay warm during the cold. And then during the 7 months, they had to spray fungicides and herbicides and all these things. And then he said he had to put on this hazmat suit and then spray through the vineyard. And for him, everything just seemed off. Because what he was working during the day and what he was studying at night were 2 complete opposites. So he decided he wanted to change it in some way. And he started this first block, this Pinot block that we spoke about earlier. And he said, well, he doesn't want to spray these poisons anymore. He wants to see if there's an alternative way of doing it. So he did his first year. He decided not to spray anything, and every single thing that you think could have gone wrong with that block went wrong. He had every single case, every single disease, nothing went right. And then he was very, very lucky to come across this lady. And she told him that what you are doing at the moment is you are farming organically, but you're farming organically by neglect and not by design. And she said, what you need to start doing, you need to know you still need to farm, but you need to farm organically by design. And then he started changing the way he thought about things. And then he was lucky enough to come across another lady. He had these lucky connections.
Lucky ladies.
Yeah. and this lady, she was kind of seen as the doyen or the starter of biodynamics within South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And she heard of what he was trying to do on the farm, and she said, have you ever thought about biodynamics or farming biodynamically? And then he sat and he spoke to him about the philosophy of biodynamics, and it just all clicked. It was as if that last little missing piece of the puzzle that he needed just kind of was found in it, and it slotted in. And that's how Reyneke started converting biodynamics and farming biodynamics.
That's great. That's terrific. And is the entirety of your hectarage grown biodynamically, or just a certain percentage?
No, entirely.
Wow. So you're entirely biodynamic, and you're uber organic. Excellent.
Uber organic.
So I'm really glad that I opened up this Syrah also a couple of nights ago, because it's expressing a lot more balance than it did when I first opened it. And it's got a peppery note on the finish, which was not there at all. It was a bit quiet. Now it's much more streamlined, giving credence that it doesn't hurt, especially with red wines, but even whites quite often, to open them well in advance of when it is you want to drink them, for many reasons. This is an excellent example of that. Again, this wine is about in that same range as the Chenin Blancs. I think this wine's a steal. You should jump out and grab this 2017 Syrah from Reyneke if there's any around you, or you can order for you. Wow. Okay, and then lastly, we're going to taste your capstone. It is 3/4 Cabernet Franc, 1/4 Cabernet Sauvignon. Those are common grape varieties. Anybody who knows their Bordeaux wines or your Cabernet Sauvignon. 2019, it's a capstone blend. And as we taste this wine, let's see, if you could please tell why it is that these two grapes were blended as such? Why so much Cabernet Franc? Usually Cabernet Sauvignon is the lead in these blends. So why Cabernet Franc is the top grape here?
That's actually an amazing question. The region in Stellenbosch where Rhinecliff wine is situated. So in South Africa, you sit with the waters to to it. So basically, you sit with this region, but Stellenbosch is a region, and then within that, you get smaller denominations, which are called wards. So the ward wine is situated in is called the Volker Hill. And here we're known for granite soil, quite close in proximity to the ocean. And on Reyneke, we're quite lucky that even with that close proximity to the ocean, we still got a bit of altitude. So the highest point on Reyneke wines would be about 290 meters above sea level. And then you'll be about 15 kilometers from the ocean and the coastline. Maybe a bit further, it could be exaggerated. But you can stand in the vineyard and you'll be able to see False Bay. And with that, the region has become quite popular within South Africa. And the main grapes the region has become popular for is Chenin Blanc and Syrah. So as we said, with the Syrah, we managed to get this lovely kind of pepperiness and perfume within the Syrah. And then the third variety, which is kind of a bit of a dark horse in the region, is Cabernet Franc. And Cabernet Franc in the Volker Dry region, you get a tightness, but there's this almost perfume that you get out of the Cabernet Franc. You get the flowering of pure cherry that comes through, and then there's touch of like green spice almost, but the edges on the cherry.
I'm with you there, Barbara. There's definitely a perfume note coming off of this that you wouldn't necessarily get off a Cabernet Sauvignon driven wine, which is a bit richer and darker and deeper, has its own value points. But Cabernet Franc certainly is more perfumed on the nose. It gives a lighter, crisper, even some often say raspberry note to your Cabernet blends. And yes, so this certainly expresses that. Be a terrific wine for a braai if we're having one right now. And a couple of points here. South Africa is a long way and quite a cost for Americans to visit. What reasons should someone come? Just high points here. Why should someone come if they're only not just for the wine? But what else is there that sets South Africa apart? Why should people come on visit?
Oh, there are lots of reasons. Number one,
what's your favorite?
For me, probably my favorite people. I think you'll find if you come to South Africa, the hospitality that you'll experience would be it's we love having people over in our country, and we love entertaining people and just welcoming people to our beautiful little corner of the world. The other would probably be natural scenery, especially if you come toward the wine side. You've got some of the most beautiful beaches and ocean views, and then along with that, you've got these lovely mountainscapes. So if you at all an adventurous active person, you can either go surfing in the ocean or going for a swim, or you can go hiking in the mountains. There's tons of cycling routes. And that's all within a very close distance of each other.
That's terrific.
Just in terms of the wine, in terms of kind of the winelands itself, within a 3-hour drive, you can get unbelievable diversity in just what you can see within the wine industry itself. You can go from Stellenbosch, which is quite mountainous and quite temperate. Then from there you can go to the Leeuwman Arbor, which is a bit cooler, a bit closer to the ocean, or you can go to the Swartland, which is a lot drier, it's a bit more rugged, but then you also get those amazing wines.
And then you have, of course, Cape Town, which is one of the world's great cities to visit. I had the pleasure of taking the tram up and walking all the way down from Table Mountain. It was quite an experience.
Yeah.
I got smiles of approval from people who saw me skipping my way down the mountain there. But the easy but I didn't do the hard part. I didn't walk up. Okay. Barbara, on a more personal note, if you could please share with the listening audience, was there a moment in your career in wine, which is admittedly still just beginning, was there a moment in which you were brought to tears or had a groundswell of emotion with one individual wine, or maybe something to do with your work in it? Was there one special moment for you?
Sure. Look, I think that's the amazing thing about wine, is that you have the possibility to have these moments. Now, there are quite a few. If you're lucky enough to work in wine, and you're really passionate about wine, you get to taste a lot of wine. There are a lot of wines that come past you, which just make you stand still and you get goosebumps. And you just share light bulbs. Something ethereal and amazing we get to work with. Just in terms of probably my work career, that happened a few times where I remember there was one Chenin Blanc that we had at the winery, and it was one of those wines I didn't have to do anything with it. It was just perfect. Now that's just why it was protein stable, cold stable, without even having to touch it. It had this beautiful line of acidity that should trickle down your palate, and everything was just tight and focused and balanced.
So it worked for you from both a hedonistic perspective and a technical perspective. Wow, this wine is perfect. It's blowing my mind and blowing my palate. And what's more, I don't need to work with it. It's done.
It's done. I don't even need that. So I can just put it in bottles. So.
Wow. Well, Barbara, look, thank you very much for joining us from all the way in Stellenbosch, South Africa at Reyneke Wines. Barbara Melck, everybody, thank you for joining us at Drinking on the Edge.
Thank you very much.